This year, Panasonic released two of the most important cameras in its history, the full-frame mirrorless S1 and S1R models. I've already checked out and was impressed by the video-centric S1. Now I'm taking a look at the more photography-oriented S1R, and what better place to do that during a heat wave than along the banks of the Seine River in Paris. On paper, the S1R is a beast. The full-frame L-mount borrowed from Leica is impressive, as is the 5-axis in-body stabilization, big rugged body, dual card slots, and most importantly for photographers, the 47.2 megapixel sensor. Panasonic has 3 lenses now, with a lot more coming in the near future. As with the S1R though, I'm concerned about the contrast detect autofocus system. Hard as Panasonic has tried, it still doesn't stand up to phase detect, especially for video. That said, the high-resolution S1R is aimed more at photographers than videographers. So let's dive in to see how it holds up. Apart from the high-resolution sensor, the biggest strength of the S1R is the handling and build quality. Sure, it's big and heavy, weighing 350 grams more than Sony's new A7R IV, but many photographers prefer the extra heft, and as you'll soon see, it's that size for a reason. First of all, the grip is deep and thick, giving me confidence that I'm never going to drop it even in the rain. And there's a lot of room for dials and buttons, so it's really easy to handle, even by feel. It's also got a large 5-axis in-body stabilization system that's superior to rival models from Nikon and Sony. It seems to work equally well whether you're shooting video and audio, and is particularly handy if you're using unstabilized lenses like this 50mm model here. The S1R has a huge battery along with dual card slots for both XQD and UHS Type 2 SD. It has both microphone and headphone ports, along with a USB Type-C port for both charging and data transfers, and a full-sized HDMI port. It's got a 5.76 million dot OLED EVF that's fast and nearly lag-free, so you really don't need an optical viewfinder anymore. Everything is touch-enabled, and it's easy to change shooting modes and settings thanks to a menu system that's far superior to what Sony has. One drawback is the battery life that's hampered by that high-resolution electronic viewfinder and the high-resolution sensor. The biggest flaw, though, is the lack of a flip-around screen. That makes no sense to me, considering that Panasonic's GH5 has one. Even if the camera isn't really designed for vlogging, it's still a pretty handy feature. Images are incredibly sharp in both JPEG and RAW, and colors very accurate, especially for skin tones. And since the resolution is pushing 50 megapixels, you've got a lot to work with for detailed subjects. In one way, Panasonic's decision to stick with contrast detect paid off, as you can push exposures more with no traces of banding seen on Canon, Nikon, and Sony cameras. Low-light, high ISO performance is lacking compared to Sony's A7R IV and the Nikon Z7, both cameras in the same category. That said, since the S1R has more resolution than both those models, you can shrink down the noise a bit more. However, it also has lower dynamic range than both those models, so you're losing a little bit of detail in both shadows and highlights. The S1R is really not aimed at videographers like the S1 is. Much like Sony's A7R III and the Nikon Z7, it's a photographer's camera that happens to do video. Still, compared to those models, it's not bad at all. Unlike the S1, you don't get 10-bit HDR video either externally or internally, nor will you be able to get that via a paid upgrade like you can now with the S1. And where the S1 captures crisp video, pixel binning on the S1R will result in some undesirable aliasing. Things aren't all bad though. You still get 60 frame per second 4K and 180 frame per second 1080p video, which beats what Sony has on offer, even with its new A7R IV. And it has much less rolling shutter than Sony's A7R III as well. Since I reviewed the S1, Panasonic released a firmware update, and it seems to have made a big difference in autofocus for the S1R. There's now a lot less hunting, and I can't notice any of the pulsing in the background that I was seeing before, so a lot of credit to Panasonic for that. Going into this review, I expected the S1R to deliver great image quality, and while it didn't quite meet my expectations, it was still very good. And I was impressed by most other aspects of the camera, including the handling, super sharp EVF, and powerful image stabilization system. I was concerned about whether the contrast detect system would nail autofocus consistently. I'm happy to say that it did so, particularly while shooting high-resolution photos in low-light conditions. It even stood up okay for video, thanks in part to Panasonic's latest firmware update. So that begs the question, is the S1R worth $3,700? If you had asked me this even a month or two ago, I would have said yes. However, Sony's incredible new 61 megapixel A7R IV has put me in a tight spot here based on the brief look we've had. For $200 less, you get a lot more, including much higher resolution, phase detect autofocus with incredible AI-powered eye detection, and video features on par with the S1R. Sony isn't giving Panasonic an inch in performance and has a proven track record with 3 previous A7R models, while Panasonic is just coming up with its first full-frame cameras. It's too bad because the S1R is a pretty incredible camera, but like Canon and Nikon, Panasonic is simply getting lapped by Sony in the mirrorless camera race.